Today is Tuesday, July 15th. We're talking about the new plan for the Education Department now that the U.S. Supreme Court has weighed in. And more flash flooding, this time on the East Coast. Also, President Trump's plans to help Ukraine and punish Russia as the war drags on. Plus, the grocery store staple that could be getting more expensive. Meta's new push towards superintelligence that's costing hundreds of billions of dollars. And the secrets to longevity from the oldest woman who ever lived. Those stories and even more news coming up. Welcome to The Newsworthy. All the day's news in around 10 minutes. Fast, fair, fun, and on the go. I'm Erica Mandy. Thanks so much for being here. You ready? Let's do this. President Trump has gotten the go-ahead to effectively dismantle the Department of Education. It's something the Trump administration started in the spring, but then a federal judge said efforts to gut the department had to stop and workers who were laid off had to be reinstated. Well, yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court said that ruling could be lifted. This is not the final word on this issue, since the case is still making its way through the lower courts. But many states and school districts worry without anything standing in the way, damage will be done to the department that will be impossible to reverse by the time a final ruling comes down. The court's decision was unsigned, which is typical for emergency requests like this, but the three more liberal justices made their opposition known, saying President Trump is overstepping his authority. For now, the Trump administration is celebrating. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the decision a win for students and families, and she promised to move forward with thousands of layoffs. Remember, the Trump administration has been trying to limit the federal government's role in schools to let individual states handle it on their own. For now, the federal education department is still responsible for managing student loans, tracking student achievement, and enforcing civil rights laws in schools. Typically, it also distributes funding, but that's been on hold too. And just yesterday, about half of all states filed a new lawsuit over that funding. They're specifically upset about nearly $7 billion that was meant to go to after-school care, English language learning, teacher training, and other programs. School districts and their partners were expecting the money on July 1st ahead of the upcoming school year. Instead, the Education Department just told states the money was under review to see if it aligned with President Trump's priorities. Now, the new lawsuit says the freeze has caused chaos for school districts, and it argues spending decisions should be left to Congress. So far, no response from the Trump administration. To be continued. The U.S. Justice Department has gotten rid of its top ethics official. The former ethics director confirmed that he was fired without being given a reason. But it happened on the same day Attorney General Pam Bondi dismissed more than 20 employees involved in different investigations of President Trump. And the ethics director did advise special counsel Jack Smith when it came to his criminal charges Trump faced during the Biden administration. More DOJ employees are expected to lose their jobs in the coming weeks as the new Weaponization Working Group, as it's called, reviews past prosecutions. President Trump laid out two new ways he's trying to pressure Russia to end its war with Ukraine. First, he announced a new pipeline for American weapons to reach Ukraine. The U.S. will be dramatically increasing weapons supplies to European allies who will buy them and then send them to Ukraine. The supplies will include missiles, artillery shells, and more. It's a big shift for Trump, who originally said he would only supply defensive weapons, so not to escalate the war. Next, President Trump threatened Russia with new trade consequences if Russian President Putin did not agree to a peace deal within 50 days. Specifically, he warned buyers of Russian exports would face new 100% tariffs. Since Russia doesn't do much trade directly with the U.S., secondary sanctions like that are America's most effective way to impact the Russian economy. And countries like China and India that buy Russian oil could also feel the pinch. That is, unless there's progress with peace talks. And Ukraine says it's ready to sit down. But whether Russia is willing to negotiate is yet to be seen. Stay tuned. Major metro areas in the Northeast are now dealing with flash flooding. As of early this morning, warnings are in effect for millions of people across several states. Intense flooding has been reported in New York City and Newark, New Jersey, as well as parts of Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Maryland. Emergency crews have had to rescue people from their cars, and subway stations had to shut down. Several airports, like those in the New York City area, issued ground stops and delays. There could be even more impacts early this morning in places like Washington, D.C., Baltimore, and Philadelphia. Former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo launched a new run for mayor of America's largest city, this time as an independent. It comes after he just lost the Democratic primary to a self-described socialist candidate, Zohran Mamdani. Cuomo says he still has a chance, though, since only 13% of New Yorkers voted in that primary. Now voters are going to have a lot of choices. Besides Cuomo and Mamdani, there's also another Democrat running as an independent, current mayor Eric Adams, plus the Republican candidate Curtis Sliwa. The general election for New York City mayor is coming up this November. More news ahead in just a moment, but first, thanks to our sponsor, Fatty 15. Okay, I admit it, I've felt some effects of getting older, and honestly, it's surprised me. I didn't think I'd already be feeling things like a sore back or stiff joints at times. So I'm doing everything I can for my long-term health and wellness, which is why I'm excited about our new partner, Fatty 15. Based on over 100 studies, there's information that says C15 strengthens our cells and is a key longevity-enhancing nutrient. In fact, Fatty 15 explains that when our cells don't have enough C15, our cells age faster. And when our cells age, our bodies age too. Fatty 15 is a science-backed, award-winning, vegan, 100% pure C15 supplement that is said to have 3 times more cellular benefits than omega-3 or fish oil. It's vegan-friendly and free of flavors, fillers, allergens, or preservatives. Truly, there's no flavor or fishy aftertaste in this pill. I appreciate how easy it is to take in the mornings and has absolutely become part of my daily routine. Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier longer. And right now, you can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/newsworthy and using the code newsworthy at checkout. Again, get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/newsworthy and using code newsworthy at checkout. Now back to the news. A group of ice cream makers that produce more than 90% of ice cream sold in the U.S. says it'll remove many artificial food dyes from its products by the start of 2028. The trade group for dairy companies says the companies plan to drop common dyes like Red 40, Yellow 5, Blue 1, and more from their retail products. It was announced at an event also hosted by top U.S. health and agricultural officials, including Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He's pushed to phase out synthetic dyes across the food industry, and major food companies like General Mills, Hershey, and Kraft Heinz have already pledged to make similar moves. Supporters say it's a step toward better health, especially for children. Critics argue more scientific evidence is needed to link food dyes to issues like ADHD and cancer. In fact, the group of ice cream makers behind the pledge maintains artificial colors are safe, but says it wants to get ahead of possible sales disruptions. There's still no formal law or agreement about this, but RFK Jr. has said there's a mutual understanding with the food industry now that artificial food dyes will be removed. Also of note, the FDA just approved a new blue color additive derived from the fruit of the gardenia plant. It's the 4th natural color approved by the FDA in the past 2 months. Expect tomatoes to start costing extra. The Trump administration announced a new 17% tariff on fresh tomatoes from Mexico that already took effect. And that could make a big difference since Mexican tomatoes account for 2/3 of the tomatoes eaten in the U.S. Now, to be clear, this is separate from Trump's effort to increase tariffs on all kinds of products from U.S. trading partners, including Mexico, starting next month, unless a deal is reached before then. Supporters say the latest tariffs could help boost the tomato industry here in the U.S., but critics say the move will just lead to higher prices. Food prices were already up nearly 3% last month as compared to 1 year earlier. The latest inflation report, looking at the data from June, is set to come out later this morning. Elon Musk's AI company, xAI, just landed a major government deal. The Pentagon signed a contract worth up to $200 million to use xAI's technology, including its chatbot, Grok. The rollout is part of a new suite of tools called Grok for Government, and it's designed for use not just by the Pentagon, but also any federal, state, or local agency that wants to buy the tools. Defense officials say the move will help modernize operations and keep the U.S. ahead of adversaries. But the announcement comes on the heels of controversy for Grok after it generated anti-Semitic responses and praised Hitler. xAI says the issue was quickly fixed and the model was upgraded days later. Other tech giants, including OpenAI, Google, and Anthropic, also announced government contracts this week to address national security needs. Meta is going even bigger on artificial intelligence. CEO Mark Zuckerberg says the company is investing hundreds of billions of dollars to build several giant data centers to power AI. The first is said to be a massive complex called Prometheus in Ohio, coming online in 2026. Then another will be an even bigger one in Louisiana called Hyperion. Those facilities will deliver gigawatts of power, which for perspective is enough electricity to power hundreds of thousands or even millions of homes. Meta says this kind of scale is needed to compete in the global AI race and to build superintelligence, aka AI performing as well as humans or even outperforming us at many tasks. The company is already spending billions a year to make it happen and hiring some of the industry's top talent. There are growing concerns about energy use, though. Other data center projects have already strained power grids and impacted local water supplies. Still, with support from the Trump administration, Meta and other tech giants are pushing forward, and experts now predict data centers could use 20% of America's electricity by the year 2030. It's All-Star Week for the MLB, and with that, some of the best baseball players in the world are showing off their skills in Atlanta. One of the most exciting All-Star events happened last night with the Home Run Derby. It featured 8 hitters competing for who could hit the most balls out of the park. And this year, it was Cal Raleigh who came out on top, making history as the first catcher to ever win the Home Run Derby. Tonight, it's on to the MLB All-Star Game, pitting many of the best players against each other, like Shohei Ohtani in the National League versus Aaron Judge in the American League. If the game is tied after 9 innings, we'll see another Home Run Derby to determine the winner. The game kicks off at 8 p.m. Eastern on Fox or foxsports.com. That's it for the main news today, so now it's time for Trivia Tuesday, when we ask a different trivia question every week. But first, this episode is sponsored by Wix.com. Whatever you think of AI in general, there are certain ways that it can be a huge time saver. And when you're starting a business, you need all the time you can get. Thanks to Wix.com, you can answer just a few questions and get a beautiful business-ready website in minutes. I'm talking generating unique visuals to an AI agent setting up a marketing campaign for you. Wix puts incredible website creation at your fingertips. Whether you choose the AI site builder or prefer to start from a designer-made template that is fully customizable, Wix allows you to create a website in a way that is easy and fun. When I first started a business, I realized that wanting to spend every minute creating your website was just procrastination from doing what you really should be focused on. Yes, having a website is super important. You need one. But Wix lets you do it in a way that won't waste your time and energy, and it'll still have everything you need in a beautiful design. Ready to create your own website? Go to Wix.com. That's Wix.com to start building your website today. Thanks to Wix for sponsoring our show. Now back to Trivia Tuesday. And today's trivia question is, where did Amazon's Alexa get its name? Listen again next Tuesday for the answer and explanation. As for last week's trivia question, how old was the oldest person to ever live? The answer is 122 years and 164 days. That's pretty amazing considering the average life expectancy around the world is 71 years old. And a French woman named Jeanne Calment outlived that by 5 decades. When she was born in 1875, the Eiffel Tower had yet to be built, and the telephone would not be invented for another year. When she died in 1997, it was a totally different world, complete with high-speed trains, microwaves, and cell phones. A longevity expert who knew Calment credits 3 reasons she lived so long. For starters, she was wealthy, so she never had to work and always had someone at home to help her. She also did not smoke cigarettes until she was 112. And lastly, she had a great social life. Of course, to live to 122 years old, there's also a lot of luck and probably good genetics involved. But it's possible someone else could still reach this milestone. There are hundreds of thousands of centenarians alive today, and the oldest living person on Earth right now is nearly 116 years old. Well, thank you so much for joining us to get caught up on the news today. We'll be back tomorrow with the latest to know. Until then, have a great day.